good people don't smoke marijuana.
I've known Larry for a long time.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show. The medical marijuana for you and me. Ah, yeah, the medical marijuana. Whoa, 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 ah, yeah, the medical. It's the medical marijuana show. You will know.
I want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. Hey, boy, don't feel my world untrue. Yeah, I want to talk to you. My world can be true if you do what I tell you to. I want to talk to you.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Medical Marijuana Radio. This one is for Saturday, the 16th of June, 2018. I'm your host, Larry Love. We're here every week to bring you the latest information on the use of medical cannabis and the fight for legalization of adult cannabis. From all over the globe, we get this information. This week, we have two separate interviews. The first one will be with Regina Nelson, who has a update to her ECS therapy endocannabinoid book that was put out about 3 years ago. There's all kinds of new stuff that she added a bunch of pages, and we're going to talk about that and dosing. And then also, for those of you that grow, you have a legal right to grow here in New Mexico with the PPL, or if you're in other states where you are allowed to grow, we're going to have talk about growing. And for New Mexicans, we have IGrowNM Mexico, which is Carlos Gonzales and his company, who travel around the state to help people with PPLs who maybe have never grown this wonderful plant before. So we'll have that as well. But first up, as always, I've got news for you. Some of it isn't so good.
1, 2, 3. I've got news for you.
Yep, I got news for you. And here in New Mexico, a really bad decision by the Department of Health. That's kind of like what they do all the time. This is from the Santa Fe Reporter. CBD crackdown. New Mexico medical cannabis program threatens producers. These are the licensed producers that grow our medicine here over out-of-state CBD. But its reach is unclear. And this was written by Aaron Cantu just a day or so ago in the, again, Santa Fe Reporter. As more products containing cannabis-derived CBD are for sale to local consumers, the state health department is trying to crack down. That's right, they're cracking down on CBD. On June 7th, the New Mexico Medical Cannabis Program sent a warning letter to producers and approved entities who sell CBD products obtained from outside the state, that they were violating federal law and that they were subject to disciplinary action, civil and even criminal penalties under state law, which is interesting. I go on. But the DOH tells SFR that the warning only applies to dispensaries licensed to produce cannabis under the state's cannabis program. In Santa Fe, at least 6 locations operated by the state licensed medical producers offer people without medical cannabis card the ability to purchase CBD products. There are also at least 2 hemp-focused stores that sell CBD for medicinal use but do not come under the purview of the Department of Health. CBD is touted for its medicinal qualities while producing none of the psychoactive effects of THC, the cannabinoid that gets you high. Some people call it euphoria. The letter from the DOH points to a line in the Linen, Air, and Compassionate Use Act that the law laid the foundation for the medical cannabis program in 2007, which says, Any licensed producer who obtains or transports cannabis outside New Mexico is in violation of federal law and could be prosecuted under state law. However, the same section also says any producer that sells or gives cannabis to a person who doesn't have a medical cannabis card could also be subject to prosecution. Since all CBD products derive from the cannabis plant, the letter suggests that total compliance would mean dispensaries under its purview would need to close up their CBD sections for non-patients. It's also unclear whether it would also apply to the sale of hemp, too, which is formerly the cannabis sativa plant, but contains almost no THC. A state Supreme Court decision legalized the study of them and manufacture of hemp in April. The DOH submitted the following statement, end quote. The DOH does not have jurisdiction over shops operated outside of the program. There are at least 35 licensed nonprofit producers in our program, and the DOH has jurisdiction over each of their approved dispensaries and production facilities. The Linen Air and Compassionate Use Act allows LNPPs, that's the so-called licensed nonprofit producers, to serve medical cannabis patients. We have directed LNPPs not to sell CBD products to non-patients. Their licenses only authorize them to distribute cannabis and cannabis-derived products to enrolled patients and enrolled primary caregivers, end quote. We have not had any problems. We haven't had anyone come to our store, says Trisha Veruman, and owner of a CBD focus store, the Phyto Frontier, which operates independently of the medical cannabis program. The store carries pet products, bath bombs, tinctures, and many other products containing CBD it gets from states like Colorado, New York, and California. Vrooman says that she was under the impression it was legal to sell CBD products derived from out-of-state to non-card holders. Her store opened in February, part of a small bump in the CBD-focused stores in the region in recent months. It's not under the DOH regulation, but could technically be a violation of federal drug law. And that law is that the United States government considers CBD as a cannabinoid to be Schedule 1, and they've announced that over and over again. Of course, some people don't believe that, and they just they do what they want. CBD-focused store Sacred Wellness had a grand opening the other day, and of course I used to work for the not-so-sacred owner of that place. It's part of the extension of Not-So-Sacred Garden dispensary, and it's housed in the same suite. Sacred Garden's owner, I won't say his name because it gets me angry, says that he opened up a CBD store in stores in Santa Fe, Albuquerque, and Las Cruces because the Department of Health pressured him last year to sign a letter that he wouldn't sell CBD products to people who don't have cards. And quoting this person from Not So Sacred Garden, they're taking the position that CBD is a Schedule 1 drug under federal drug law, says he. It's not. It's clearly not. You can ship it across state lines and can be grown under the hemp rule. Well, the owner of Sacred Garden, Not So Sacred Garden, is making up his own rules. I mean, he's actually one of the deplorables. People that know me know how I feel about this man. He's telling us it's not sacred. It's not sacred. Well, it isn't. He's telling us that CBD is not a Schedule 1. So why should we listen to the owner of this Santa Fe store telling us it's not, Schedule 1, whereas the United States government says it is Schedule 1, and that's how we have to deal with it. Some of these people are just in this business for the wrong reasons, and they make up fake news. I'm not going to go on with this. It's aggravating me to even read this. Okay, the Santa Fe Reporter. The other day. You can read the rest of the article yourself, but it angers me. This goes out to the DOH here in New Mexico, and the owner of that place that I used to work.
breaking my heart. You turn it apart, so fuck you. All I wanna do is have a good time. Now I'm blue. You want boogaloo, run down new trails, have a dance or two. Ooh, breaking my heart, you turn it apart, but fuck you.
Okay, got that out of my system. There are people, though, that are working to help this situation with medical cannabis and the Trump organization, the Trump administration. And here is Senators Elizabeth Warren and Senator Gardner in an interview from last week, a couple of days ago, I think, in Colorado. And actually, I think it might be... That's not Colorado. Anyway, here's an interview. These people are really working hard for us. Gardner is a Republican. Elizabeth Warren is a Democrat, but they're really trying to make marijuana policy, and they want to leave it to the states. Here is this. They're fighting for us. They're trying to help.
From the Capitol, Senators, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And let me first ask what exactly this bill would do. Senator Warren, let me start with you.
This is a bill that says when the states have passed different laws about marijuana, maybe it's about medical marijuana, recreational marijuana, it will conflict with the federal law on marijuana because nothing has been changed. And this bill says the federal government will treat the state's law as the law of that state. In other words, no interference. So when Massachusetts laws go into effect, then the federal government will recede and Massachusetts will be the one in control of its destiny on marijuana. Same thing for Colorado, same thing for any other state.
Senator.
Yeah, and look, it's basically a way to try to deal with a law that's just antiquated. The federal law is an absolute prohibition. It treats marijuana as a Schedule I drug, which is the same as heroin and cocaine. And says it has no research use, it has no medical use, which, frankly, we'd like to be able to do more research around it. And we have a lot of evidence starting to grow that there are medical uses for marijuana. And besides, folks in Massachusetts, just like folks in Colorado, got together and said, here's how we want to treat marijuana in Massachusetts. And now that that's the case, we think the federal government just ought to back off.
Why not just change the federal law then and legalize marijuana at the federal level?
Well, I think you could certainly do that. In fact, there have been legislative attempts to do just that, and they've gone nowhere. But if you look at the Constitution, whether it's the 10th Amendment or the Interstate Commerce Clause, the Interstate Commerce Clause talks about goods of an intrastate nature being regulated by the state. And so this is something that I think our founders said there may be disagreement, so let's let states do what they want to. It's also a way for us to politically thread a needle with a couple of tricky issues that we haven't been able to find so far. Number one, there are states that aren't going to want to do this. Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska. I think they've even sued Colorado over some of the marijuana industry's impact that they felt that they could see in their states. The other thing that it addresses, of course, is the banking issue. Right now, if you're a business, you're a landlord and you receive rent from a marijuana business, if you're a worker who gets paid by one of these industries, you can't take it to the bank. And so this fixes the financial services issue, the banking prohibitions. And the third thing it fixes, of course, is this issue of taxation. Many of these businesses, medical businesses and others, are paying 90% tax rates, effective rates, because they can't take a standard business deduction like any other business would. So this fixes in a very elegant, simple fashion those questions through a federalism approach.
I want to listen here to the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who last week was asked about your bill in an interview with Colorado Public Radio.
At this time, my view is clear that the federal law remains in effect nationwide, just like it does for heroin or cocaine. And that, of course, it's not the death-dealing drug in the same way that fentanyl or heroin is, but it remains on the books as a prohibited substance.
If your bill cannot get the support it needs, do you think there's any chance of convincing Jeff Sessions to do what you want him to do, essentially, without having a law in place to say that?
look, I don't think we're going to change Jeff Sessions' mind. I think that's what he was saying on Colorado radio. I'm not changing my mind. Okay, we get that. But the problem is, even if you could back off the Attorney General and get the Attorney General to stay out of Massachusetts as we start to put our new marijuana laws in place, the problem is there are other difficulties in law. So as Senator Gardner identified, for example, a marijuana business can't put its cash into an FDIC-insured bank because that cash, from a federal law perspective, appears to come from an illegal source. Right. And so that's why we need our bill, whether Jeff Sessions is Attorney General or somebody else is Attorney General.
That was Elizabeth Warren and Senator Gardner from, he's a Republican from Colorado. All right, so they were talking about Jeff Sessions. Jeff Sessions was on WIBC Fort Wayne, Indiana the other day, and they talked a little bit about cannabis as well.
You've talked about marijuana here in Indiana. As you're going to be here, there's now a conversation, our General Assembly doing a summer study of medical marijuana. Is this still a front and center issue for you, and should it be?
Well, I'll just say two things about it. Marijuana remains in violation of the law of the United States government. We've never prosecuted small marijuana cases, and that's not changing, but it does remain in violation of the laws of the United States. I'm not able to change that. Secondly, while you could perhaps extract certain things from marijuana and use it as medicine, I think that's possible, although it's not, I think, quite as proven as most people say. But you probably can, and that's perfectly legitimate. But to just advocate and suggest in any way that regular, normal smoking of marijuana is healthy and is anything but dangerous, I think is a mistake. The people need to know this is not a healthy substance. It can do permanent damage, particularly to young people's brains, and I just think that people need to study it very carefully before they participate in using marijuana. It's just not a healthy thing.
It's just not a healthy thing. But meanwhile, he wants to study it, but he's also said in the past that it may have some medicinal value, but in the long run, it's not going to be proven out. We played that in a couple of weeks ago on one of the shows. But at the same time that he's saying all that, the United States government, and I understand it's been going on for a long time, has been actually funding part of the research in Israel by Professor Raphael Mechoulam. And Professor Mechoulam has been studying this plant and discovered THC and just back in the 60s. He's been doing it for 60 years. And we've been funding that for millions of dollars. The United States has given money to Israel to fund that study. And, he just doesn't get it. But here is Dr. Mechoulam. Doctor. I don't believe he's a doctor. He's a researcher and a professor. But here is Professor Mechoulam about children. And I believe what he says because he's been studying this plant longer than anyone else that is breathing air.
So in 1995, you had an idea of testing THC on children.
It has been known for many years that cannabis can lower the effects of anti-cancer drugs. Anti-cancer drugs, many of them, cause terrible side effects. And in children, unfortunately, children get cancer as well. Children vomit and want to vomit, have nausea. They're really in a bad shape. And they cry all the time, and their parents are in a bad shape. Luckily, most of the children can be cured of the cancer, but the treatment is absolutely difficult. We wanted to do a clinical trial in children. We did that with Professor Aya Avramov. She was head of the Department of Pediatric Oncology in one of the Jerusalem hospitals. And we did a major study with THC given in oily drops under the tongue of children. Obviously, children cannot smoke. We had children that were not even 1 year old. We dropped, or she dropped, THC in oil, in olive oil, under the tongue at 2 or 3 times a day, small doses, during the anti-cancer treatment. At the beginning, we wanted to do a double-blind study. Some of the children got the THC, some other children got only the olive oil. After a week, she told me, I'm not going ahead with that. I know exactly who is getting the THC. I know exactly who is not getting it. There was a complete separation. Those that didn't get it continued to vomit. So she went ahead doing an open study, and she gave THC, pure THC, under the tongue about 400 times, which means that those that were involved in the experiment got it every time they were treated with whatever they were being treated. And at the end, we saw that we had complete block of vomiting, complete block of nausea by small amount of THC, which did not cause any psychoactivity, nothing. So here we had a complete therapeutic effect. And we published that. And again, essentially nothing happened. Finito, that was it. It's still not being used in children.
And you think it's a good idea to use it for
Well,
children?
I believe it's an excellent idea because we help those children that suffer. But I have no influence on oncologists.
Professor Raphael Mechoulam. They proved that it works for children. They weren't getting high. It was helping them. The kids that weren't taking THC, they still had their nausea. The kids that were taking it, they had no nausea. It works. Yet there's the powers that be that are even stifling Professor Mechoulam. Wow. Well, you know what? The endocannabinoid system, we didn't know about it, most of us, for a long time. A few years ago, Regina Nelson put out a book called ECS Therapy, all about the endocannabinoid system and so forth. She just did an update, and we had her on for a couple of minutes earlier today, and we talk about dosing and how to dose and so forth. And there is a new companion, not a companion, it's an update of her book with an extra bunch of pages with some new things that have happened in the last 3 years. So here's Regina Nelson. And we're back, and online, once again, one of my favorite guests, Regina Nelson, calling in from Boulder, Colorado. Regina has just updated her ECS Therapy Companion book after 3 years. And so welcome back again, Regina. And what's new in the new version of the book?
Wow, it's got a new title, new cover, and a ton of new content. It's called The Survivor's Guide to Medical Cannabis. It's currently up and available on my websites and on Amazon. And I'm formally doing a book release launch party on July 11th at the Hampton Museum in Berlin, Germany. So I'm really excited. It's been 3 years, like you said, since the ECS Therapy Companion Guide came out, and so much has happened in cannabis, and we know so much more than we knew then. And so it's, I think the companion guide was around 200 plus pages. This is close to 300 pages. A lot more information and dosing guidelines for people who are in states like Oklahoma and Texas that are only able to dose with CBD products, because there are some differences there.
Right.
And so, this is really kind of an expanded edition.
Now, we went through, when you were on last time, we did talk about dosing, and I think it's really, really important. You gave out a formula, which was X amount of milligrams per your weight. Can you just tell us that again, please? Because I think that everybody should know that.
Yeah, I give everybody kind of the guide of thumb that you're looking to titrate to 1 milligram per kilo of your weight. So whatever you weigh, you divide that by 2.2 pounds, because we're Americans. And whatever you're left with there, it kind of gives you a guideline on what to titrate to. And I always kind of give the example of a 220-pound man would be looking to titrate to 100 milligrams of cannabis a day.
Absolutely.
And that's a lot. And if someone that size tried to take 100 milligrams at one time, it would be too much. So they need to start slow and start with 5 to 10 milligram doses 3 or 4 times a day and slowly titrate that up as they become comfortable with it. And it's usually about the time they hit that little magical number that they, really feel like they're able to control a lot of their symptoms much, better than
And I can agree with you on that, because that's really basically I weigh about 216, 218, so I take about 100 milligrams. I'm also down about 90 pounds from 9 years ago, so it's been a slow, but so it's really, it really is very true once you hit that. So what happens when you are at that for a while and you sort of get a tolerance? Should you increase yourself or just stay with that dosage because that's what's good for your weight?
Well, I think the main thing is it really depends on what your symptoms are. And, you can't titrate to the euphoria. And that's kind of the key. You kind of have to get where it's not about getting high, it's about, are your symptoms under control?
Right.
And if your symptoms are under control, most people are pretty good right in there. But some people, particularly who have conditions like I do, fibromyalgia, for instance, I tend to have days where I flare due to weather conditions, due to maybe a wide variety of things that have affected me. I might have a fibro flare, and on those days, I need to consume more cannabis. And because I've built a tolerance at that 1 milligram per per kilo level, if I increase my dose a little bit to get control of the pain, I don't get real stoned. I may get a little bit of euphoria that I don't usually get, but overall what I get is symptom management.
Right. Well, people
And
have
that's
to
really what people are looking for.
Let me I'll just interrupt and say people have to understand that getting stoned is just a side effect of the work that the cannabinoids are doing in your body. Even if you came to a tolerance at 100 milligrams or 60 or 80 or whatever it is, and you were still taking that, it's still working in your body. It's still doing stuff. It's doing great things. It's not about the euphoric effect. So it's still working. And even...
Well,
Go ahead.
we find this with CBD, and this is what's so interesting to me is that people pretty commonly know that CBD really is only mildly euphoric. And most people think it's non-euphoric. It actually is just very mildly euphoric. And, yet you get a product that's a hemp oil product, in Oklahoma, and people are like, well, I don't feel anything when I'm taking it. And what they mean by that is I'm not getting high, so I'm not sure if it's working. But if you start to talk to them and ask them their symptoms, what's your pain like? How are you sleeping? How are you eating? If you find out what their condition is and you understand what their symptomology is and you ask them, you can start to find out, is that helping their symptoms? And that's really the key. So I ask people to track those things beforehand and, particularly new patients to this, to kind of keep a journal on how it is working for them and what ways they're consuming cannabis, that may work better than others.
Right, and journaling is really important, especially, at this point in time of the medical cannabis industry, because we can learn from other people's, things that other people have done. We can learn what to do, what not to do, and so forth. So journaling is great. I love people that write down how much they took, what time they took it, how long their pain was gone. I mean, it's really, really very important. So, go ahead.
And I have guidelines for journaling in the book. So people, if they're not sure how to start that, there are pages in the book that are like, all you need to do is fill this out. List your symptoms here. Rate your quality of pain. And it helps them build their own therapy plan. So that's kind of the guideline for this book. This idea for this book started back when I was a patient in New Mexico back in 2012 and was trying to find out how to take care of myself with cannabis. And it just kind of walks people through the endocannabinoid system and why phytocannabinoids are so important. But towards the end of the book, it gives dosing instructions that anyone can follow, but it also covers dosing guidelines. As you said, we learn from other people. And I've had that pleasure and privilege of being able to learn from thousands of people. And so I put all that information into the book so people can kind of understand how people with different conditions manage, their symptomology.
It's really particular to everybody because these cannabinoids really do act and perform differently in everyone's body. Some people are opposites,
Absolutely.
and it's really important. So before we go, I just want to I want to give out, of course, where people can get this the new edition with the upgrade of new things that have happened in the last 3 years. But just give us the biggest surprise that you had in the last 3 years that you had to put in the book? Did something change? Did something get better? Was there a new cannabinoid that is doing things that we didn't know about? Tell me, what was the most important thing you put in your new edition?
Yeah, now that you say that, I think it is that we've come to discover just in the last year, within the last year, that really the only difference that we know of the sativa and indica as we would experience it in the dispensary is one thing, and it's not a cannabinoid, it's a terpene. It's myrcene. And so I think that's really important for people to know. And as we learn more about cannabis, I think there's that kind of information. I was really surprised too. Again, just in the last year, we're starting to see more nanoemulsifications, and this is a pharmaceutical technique that has come to cannabis that helps make these fat-soluble molecules water compatible.
Right.
So now we're starting to, and so that's something different that we weren't seeing 3 years ago.
Right. I've actually tried the Cannabis. It's called, there's a place here in Santa Fe called Best Days, DAZE, and they have this Cannabis, which is what you're talking about. It's it's THC and cannabinoid encapsulated in fat. Now personally, I was told that it's becomes more, it comes on faster, it gets into the system faster. I didn't really find that for myself, so I really still believe that it's really particular to everybody. It's different for everyone. I did find that it did give me an effect, and of course, for me, I like the effect from 100 milligrams of a candy bar than 100 milligrams of the nano fat molecules.
Right.
For me, the other stuff is a little bit more effective. But
Right. And everybody's going to have, again, their own individual choices and what feels better to them, what works better for them. What's nice is that we have more opportunities now. There's more things available to people. So that I'm pleased about.
So where can people get your new edition? And I think you have some signed copies that people can get if they want as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They can come to the website, myecstherapy.org, or they can absolutely order it from Amazon as well.
Okay, so again, give us the new title of the book.
The Survivor's Guide to Medical Cannabis.
Wow, and of course, survivors is what we're trying to be. There's so many people out there that cannabinoids are really helping. So, Regina Nelson, thank you so much for updating us today. Whenever you have some things to say, please, set something up with me and let's tell people what's new, okay?
Great. Thank you so much, Larry. Thanks for having me on.
So that was Regina Nelson. It's the ECS Therapy Companion Guide for Survivors. So we'll be right back with Carlos Gonzales from IGrow, New Mexico. He's here for New Mexicans to travel around the state and help you grow your medicine. It really isn't as easy as you may think. We'll be right back.
It's all about the 420 MMJ Radio. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio show.
And we're back on Online Today from IGrowNM, which is a new, although it's been around for a little while, service for people in New Mexico with a medical cannabis license who are able to grow. Welcome, Carlos, and tell me, this is just a weed, so why do people need help to grow this plant?
Well, Larry, it is a weed, but it's more than that. It is medicine for us patients, so we got to make sure we treat it as a medicine. So we want to make sure it's free of chemicals, free of any insects that might harm us. as humans, and make sure we know how to treat it when we harvest it. We just don't cut it and put
Right.
it in a pipe, let's say it. That's not the way. So there's a lot of different methods
There's
and
a
procedures that need to be taken.
there's a lot of stuff in between popping a seed or getting a clone and getting to that harvest. That's for sure. So let me ask you this. So people here in New Mexico, we have a very short grow season for outdoors. So obviously indoors is preferable for some people. For a first-time grower, do you advise starting with one season outdoors to see how things go, or can people just jump right into doing an indoor grow?
With the right education and right care, we could do either or. I always suggest people to go basic, take it basic steps. So treat it just like when you have your PPO license. Make sure you just treat it as a regular plant in your garden, and you could put it right next to your tomato at the beginning,
Right.
and
So
just
for
observation and let
Mhm.
it grow and observing what happens with it. And like I said, just getting educated and knowing what to expect from the plant in its appropriate cycle.
Uh-huh. Yes, absolutely. Well, they have lots of cycles, the two major ones, but of course, things can happen. For a first-time grower, I mean, we have, thousands of growers, PPL growers, patients that grow for themselves. But again, it's not that easy. A first-time grower, because people are very excited when they get their license, would you advise if they're going indoors to be hydroponic or to be in some other kind of medium?
I advise, like I mentioned, just keep it simple. Hydroponic, there's a lot of gadgets and parts behind it, and any single part that mixed functions can lead to the death of the plant right away. So I suggest just starting with soil, basic. There's a lot of nutrients out there, and the head shops are going to try to sell you a lot of products. So just like I mentioned, try to keep it simple and not be too out there and try to get the best produce that they're trying to sell you at the moment.
Right. So obviously, there's ways of growing that are organic and ways that aren't organic. So what are you advising? And also for first-time growers, do you advise them to grow just maybe one or two plants? Because it can get very overwhelming if you're starting, 16 seedlings and you're looking to get, four mature plants and then rotate and so forth. So what are you advising in that case? Maybe just grow one or two when you're
So
learning?
yeah, it all depends on case by case. Some people have the space for it. Some live in an apartment. So it just depends on your space and condition. And that's like the first thing we should always identify when we grow our medical cannabis. It's the space. We want to make sure it's in a safe place that is protected. We want to make sure it's not visible to everyone. So we want to be in compliance. That's a very important part of this. We don't want to plant it in the front garden of our house, even though we think we have the right. We don't really. It has to be out of visibility. So we want to make sure we're not calling out with the plant itself. So I would start with, let's say, if it's we got clones, we could go to our dispensary, get some fem clones, and we know they're feminized plants. So I would start with 4 plants, which is what we're allowed to have as at a flowering stage, and start with that and go from there. Have your 4 plants and see what happens.
All right. So if you are outside here in New Mexico and you're growing outdoors, because obviously indoors doesn't matter what time of year it is. There's a light cycle outside.
Correct.
I've started my plants in March, and then brought them outside. But if you bring them out too soon, they can flower too early. So in New Mexico, when do you think is the best time to actually, if you're starting your plants indoors, in order to get a head start, when's the best time to put them out so they don't flower early?
So it all depends on the weather, of course. This year we're facing very dry weather and very hot also. So it's very important. Let's say we start our seedlings inside. We put them outside, not to put them in the straight sun because they will burn probably that transition. So start them more in a shady part of the patio and then transition it to a more sunny part. And I would say right after mid of May is a good time of the year to put your plants outside. Of course, keeping in mind the weather here in Albuquerque, where we're at, we don't get too much of a frost in May after mid-May, so it just depends on the year.
Right.
But at this time of June, we got green light. Our garden is supposed to be outside. Those plants with this sun we have right now is supposed to be vegging real quickly, and a lot of watering should be happening at the moment because of the drought, the high temperatures that we're facing.
Right. So watering is kind of tricky. You can overwater, and of course you can underwater. When you underwater, you can tell because those girls just they just go limp, and you know they need water. But I don't know how good that is to use that as a method. So, what's the best way to figure out when to water to keep them happy?
So it just depends on the root system that your plant has, and that's something we encourage. So we practice living soil. We feed the soil and not the plant. So the soil is feeding the plant. And when we're feeding the soil, the root system is pretty smart. So it's constantly hydrating itself. So we want to make sure we water. We try to water our plants every other day. So we water them completely, we soak them, and we let them not dry, but let them get to a point where they're asking for water again.
Uh-huh. And how do you see that? What do you recognize to see that they're asking?
Well, sometimes you see their leaves they start wilting and going down. As soon as we see that, that's an indicator that they need more water usually, especially if they're out in the hot sun.
Right. So let's talk.
We recommend watering in the morning and try not avoiding watering at night. It will create more fungicides in the soil, so we avoid that.
Uh-huh. So let's talk about the water. You can't just take water out of the tap and give it to your plants. It needs to be tested for at least not parts per million. I've lost it. You need to test your water so you have the right 6.5 level.
Yeah, you need your pH
Your
to
pH.
be right there. That's correct.
All right.
Larry.
So I mean, you can really screw your plants up if your pH is too high. Mostly it's too high, not too low. But you can make it too low by adding, pH down. So is the sweet spot 6.2 for you?
That would be an appropriate pH level. And here in Albuquerque especially, we have a lot of people off the well. So it's very important they get their water tested as well for just their regular uses in their home as well. And we always recommend if you're using a hose, let that water run those first minutes because it's usually very hot water. And if you water your plants with that, you will burn the root system.
Absolutely. The water's either sitting in your hose, and it could be baking, for hours in the sun and so forth. So yeah, that's really an important, great idea. All right, so I Grow New Mexico. You have this business that goes around and helps people who need help. So you travel to their house because obviously people can only grow at their location. So tell me about your service and how often do you show up? Are you like on call and what do you guys charge?
Like I said, it is case by case patient. We do an initial assessment which consists of $80, and we go to your property and take in consideration the space where you want to grow, the techniques that you want to do, either it's indoor or outdoor, and then we do an evaluation and recommendation. From there, we help you and guide you choose the best plant for yourself. So we want to make sure you're growing the medicine that you need. So we identify with particular strains. So we try to guide you towards those strains and let you know what to expect, the time from harvesting. And there's different ways. We could start from seeds. We can start from clones. There's seeds right now called automatic, which you could pop from seeds and start harvesting 67 days from germination. So there's all different techniques that can be taken in consideration.
Right. Do you think
let me just ask you,
do you think autoflower plants are as good and vibrant and produce as much THC as regular style plants?
Um, my personal experience, no, but they do have a space for people and geography.
Right.
Not everybody has the sunshine we have in New Mexico, so people more in the northern hemisphere do feel that they get the best out of it. And then on the other side, I've grown some automatics myself personally, and had very good results with them. So I would nobody would have never you couldn't tell they're automatic.
Yeah, I
when you
think I
test
think
them.
they tend to stay small though. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and of course outdoors that doesn't make any sense to do. To
That is
do that.
correct. Yeah, there is
I
no
believe
point.
the auto flowering plants were first developed in Europe, where they have no room to grow outdoors and they have to grow inside, and they're looking to constantly produce something on a rotating basis. So
That is correct, Larry. But like I mentioned, we have different. We work case by case, and some of our patients have never grown not only cannabis, but they never grown plant in their life. So just to see the magic of the plant and seeing the full cycle within 60 days, I've seen patients that have had a enlightenment and just created that knowledge out of just that one plant that they had.
right. So you have
Yes.
so you charge $80 for like your initial consultation. So let's say like a month later, your client calls you up and says, um, it, they look like they're getting a little yellow.
Yeah, so we have an on call, which is evaluation. So we go also and we do the troubleshooting. Let's say you have infestation problems, you have spider mites, or you have like it's turning yellow. It might be some chlorophyll, chlorosis. It could be just different things going on. So we go out there and it's a $40 by the hour, and that includes getting on site, and we do the troubleshooting and we do the recommendations and treat it if we can at the moment.
What? So if somebody is actually maybe in a different part of the state, can you do anything like with Skype or with Facebook Messenger and actually like ask them to turn their camera on their plan so that you can help them maybe over the phone or over the computer?
Definitely, that's something we're starting to look into, and we do have clients that just contact us and we do it and do the consultation as well.
What do you think the biggest mistake that most people make when growing?
Just over adding too many nutrients. They want to pump it up, like we say. They just want to grow it quickly and faster, and they think it's going to result in better yields and quality, and it usually doesn't. So that's one thing we notice a lot. Overwatering, like you mentioned, is a big problem. Not to overwater your plants.
Right. And what about strain selection? I mean, is it just personal, or are there certain strains that you would advise a first-time grower to use because they're a little bit less needy?
No, there are some strains that are more needy, like we know. The Kushes, they tend to be more needy. But it just depends on your experience. So try to go with when you get your seeds, it will tell you beginner, intermediate, or advanced actually. So you could look into that. And when you buy seeds, it will tell you the germination rate and the flowering days. So those are things to take in consideration when buying seeds.
All right, so let's talk about the flowering day, how many days and so forth. Now, if it says it's a 68-day flower or a 78-day flower, do you actually go with that and just pull your plants, or are you going to look at the trichomes and see where they're really at?
Case by case, we take in consideration the parameters they give us, but we look at the plants and, like you mentioned, observe their trichomes, make sure we get that amber color, and we decide when we want to do the harvest.
Well, going all amber is really takes a long time because you're going through that. There's like all milky, then there's not all milky, all clear, and then it goes like clear to milky trichomes, and then it
Correct.
goes. The from what I've read and experienced over my years of growing, is that all milky, really dark milky, is like the big window. It's that time.
It is.
If you like it a little bit more heady and up, you would leave some clear to milky trichomes in there.
That is
And
correct.
I've said many times on this show every year when I do my grow show, which is what we're doing today, I like to take things in three stages. I take some when they're clear to milky. I might take a couple of branches, and I mark, of course, the harvest date. Then I wait, and I take maybe some more branches when they're all milky. And then I leave a few branches to go long to get that amber in so that you can get some sedative effect. I mean, that's just something that I've been doing, for, 30 years or so. And I find that you sort of get three different effects from the same plant and the same strain.
You certainly do. Yes, you do.
So you have people can see your Instagram page, which is IGrowNM. What do you post on there?
So we post our daily harvest or just our daily grows from different clients. And it's just not cannabis that we work with. We also work with edible gardens. Like I mentioned, cannabis is just a plant we want to integrate in the garden. Hopefully when we are recreational, we get it out of the closet and we just can really show it to our neighbor. It's that time. I feel like it is. It's just another plant. I mean, it has its place and its respect as any other plant, but we help people grow edible gardens, and we also help them with their yards. Myself, I have a landscape architecture background from UNM, so we're able to help people with different projects in their house, just make it more pleasable to be around.
Right. Well, cannabis is a beautiful plant to grow. It's just so much fun to wake up every morning and go into the garden, whether it's indoors or outdoors, and see how they're doing. And it's also a very sort of relaxing and meditative thing to do during your day. It's really quite a peaceful, wonderful plant. So, how can people get in touch with you if they would like to use your services?
So they can reach us in IGrowNM.com. We have a website and it's under construction, but it should be done in the next few days. Or they can send us a text in Instagram, or they can reach us by our phone number, which is 505-539-0547, and also by email, igrownm@gmail.com.
Fabulous, Carlos. I really appreciate you taking the time today. Now, I know you also live part-time in Puerto Rico, and you go back and forth. I can't, have a conversation with my good buddy who is back and forth in Puerto Rico asking you, how are things going with the hurricane and all that stuff. I know it's a very controversial thing, but I think you also have like a GoFundMe to help people in Puerto Rico, don't you?
Yes, sir. We Puerto Ricans, we are resilient people, so we are coming back from the last hurricane. We are in hurricane season already this year. Unfortunately, almost a year has passed, and it's taking that long to recover. There's still a big population without electricity and basic needs like water. So there's a lot to be done. So any help that we can get from the mainland and the island is totally appreciated.
And do you still have that GoFundMe? Is it still open?
Yes, sir. You can reach us on Foodscapes Caribe GoFundMe.
So that's
their Foodscapes
right.
Caribe.
That's Foodscapes, FOODSCAPES, and then Caribe, CARIBE. If you can give a couple bucks to help people in Puerto Rico, I think it's a state here, and unfortunately the current idiot that's in the White House just has no clue, and I apologize to the people of Puerto Rico for this shithead that we have running the mainland, so to speak. Carlos, again, Carlos will come to your house. He'll come to wherever you are growing if you need help. It's IGrowNM.com. They're working on the website, but you can still see stuff there, and you can go to IGrowNM on the Instagram as well. Carlos, thank you so much for sharing your information today.
Thank you so much, Larry, for everything you do for the cannabis community.
Thanks, buddy. I look forward to seeing you before you go back. We'll be right back after this.
is playing our song again. All the world is green. Pretend that you owe me nothing, and all the world is green. Can we bring back the old days again, when all the world is green? Yellow, silver, all the things that summer brings. It's a love you'd kill for, and all the world is green. He's balancing a diamond on a blade of grass. The dew will settle on our graves, and all the world is green. Pretend that you owe me nothing, and all the world is green. We can bring back the old days again, when all the world is green. He's balancing a diamond on a blade of grass. The dew will settle on our graves, when all the world is green. The medical marijuana. The medical marijuana. Radio. Radio. Show.
Well, I want to thank my two guests. First, Regina Nelson with her book on the endocannabinoid system, and also Carlos Gonzales from IGrowNM, New Mexico. Thanks for enlightening us today, and thanks for your service. Also, I'd like to thank my two radio mentors, both with the initials HS. You know who you are. You don't know who I am, but that's okay. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, if you have a product to sell, a story to tell, you're an activist, an activist. I'm tongue-tied today, folks. An advocate or an activist. It's info@MMJRadio.com. Again, info@MMJRadio.com. If you'd like to hear some of our old shows, you can see them at medicalmarijuanaradio.com. Also, my YouTube channel, LSLove88. SoundCloud, we're MMJ Radio, as well on Spreaker, MMJ Radio. On CannabisTube.net, you can see our video. And on Spreaker and iHeartRadio, we're on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Also on OnNowTV.com, channel 937, and theCannaChannel.com coming soon.
The medical marijuana.
Shalabah. Shalom.
Oh yeah, and fuck Trump and Mr. Shortass on Louisa. Both deplorables.
Bye.
Ba ba ba